There is a kind of desire that does not come from touch or insistence or obvious seduction. It is born in silence, in absence, in what is not said. This video is not about pleasing women. It is about disrupting inner patterns they themselves rarely admit exist. Inspired by Machiavelli, you will understand why the man who begs always loses, why the man who exposes himself too much is easily discarded, and why real attraction lives in the invisible. This is not romance. This is raw psychology. There is a truth almost nobody dares to say out loud, because it destroys comfortable stories, politically correct speeches, and romantic fantasies that keep most people emotionally domesticated. Desire is not born from touch. Desire is born from absence. It does not come from abundance, but from scarcity. It is not created by direct effort, but by indirect suggestion. And Machiavelli would understand this completely, because human desire follows the same laws as power. Power never submits to the one who begs, only to the one who does not seem to need it. The fatal mistake most men make is believing that female desire is awakened through obvious actions, predictable gestures, excessive compliments, constant attempts to prove worth. But all of that creates the opposite effect. Hidden desire feeds on mystery, on unresolved tension, on the feeling that something exists that cannot be fully reached. When you touch too much, explain too much, reveal too much, you kill the invisible game that happens long before physical contact. True desire is born before the body, inside the imagination. This is where women build internal stories, silent fantasies, and private thoughts they would never confess publicly. And what activates this process is not insistence, but uncertainty, not constant presence, but intermittence, not direct validation, but the subtle feeling that something inside them has been slightly shaken. Machiavelli taught that the most effective power is not enforced through strength, but through perception. The same is true for desire. When you need to announce who you are, you've already lost. When you feel the need to prove something, you've already placed yourself below the other person. The man who creates desire without touching understands one fundamental rule. He does not react, he provokes. He does not just play the emotional game, he creates the board. While most men are busy trying to be chosen, he behaves like the one who chooses, and that changes everything. Female desire is rarely awakened by the man seeking approval. It is awakened by the man with an unshakable inner center, who never bends his posture just to be liked. This is not empty arrogance. It is silent autonomy. It is the feeling that even if she walks away, something inside him will remain untouched, and that perception creates restlessness. And restlessness is the soil where desire grows. There is something deeply unsettling, and at the same time irresistible, about someone who does not explain himself, who does not chase, who does not rush to fill every silence. Silence, in fact, is one of the most underestimated weapons in this game. While many men talk endlessly trying to create connection, silence creates space for projection. The human mind hates gaps. When something is left unsaid, the other person fills it with what already lives inside them. And that is where desire slips in, because it is not born from what you give, but from what she imagines. Machiavelli understood this well. The one who guides the narrative, without appearing to guide it, controls everything. Awakening hidden desire has nothing to do with cheesy seduction tricks, pickup lines, or fake behavior. All of that is obvious and easily discarded. What really works is inner coherence. Your actions, your posture, and your lack of need all aligned. Your words don't beg. Your attention is not free. Your presence is not constant, but it is unforgettable. You appear, you create impact, and you leave before the other person becomes too comfortable. Because too much comfort kills desire. Predictability suffocates it. There is also a moral mistake people make. They believe awakening desire means manipulating others, but crude manipulation is obvious, and it repels. What we are talking about here is understanding human nature. Women, like men, desire what they cannot completely control. They desire what slips away, what never fully surrenders, what refuses to kneel emotionally. Hidden desire is born from the friction between curiosity and uncertainty. When everything becomes too clear, the game ends. Machiavelli once wrote that people judge more with their eyes than with their hands, because everyone can see, but few can touch. In desire, this is even more true. What is seen, hinted, and imagined often has more power than any physical contact that comes too soon. Once you understand this, you realize something important. Touching too early is a strategic mistake. You are giving away something that was still gaining value. Desire likes to wait, to grow in the dark, to be fed by small signals, not excess. The man who understands this does not chase attention. He receives it as a natural consequence. He does not try to impress. He simply exists with solidity. His life does not revolve around female validation. And that is exactly why he becomes magnetic. There is something profoundly seductive about a man who is not always available, not out of contempt, but out of purpose. Machiavelli would call this virtù, the ability to move through the world without being dragged by circumstances or by other people's desires. And the most disturbing part of all this is that it destroys everything we were taught. Be extra kind, be always available, be completely transparent. But desire does not follow social morality. It follows deep psychology. It is born where attention, contrast, and autonomy coexist. When you finally understand this, you stop touching, you stop asking, you stop chasing. And that is exactly when something begins to move inside a woman's mind, silently. Something she may never admit out loud, but she feels it deeply. When this dynamic starts operating, something curious happens. A woman begins to feel first, and only later tries to understand. Hidden desire does not appear as a logical decision. It arrives as a subtle discomfort, a quiet attention that keeps returning, a thought that refuses to go away. And this doesn't happen because you did something amazing, but because you stopped doing what every other man does. You didn't try to be pleasing all the time. You didn't act needy for replies. You didn't react anxiously to every mood change. You stayed whole. And wholeness, in a world full of emotionally fragmented people, is deeply unsettling. Most men never realize that when they are trying to win someone, they are actually putting themselves on the shelf like a product. And every product that becomes too available loses value. Machiavelli warned that contempt is born from familiarity without respect. The same is true in desire. When you become predictable, when your reactions are obvious, when your attention is guaranteed, you stop being a psychological challenge. And without challenge, there is no desire. Desire needs resistance, not aggressive resistance, but inner firmness. The sense that you do not bend easily. There is a decisive point in this invisible game, the management of your own energy. The man who awakens desire without touching does not invest all of his emotional energy into one woman, and he never allows his entire emotional life to revolve around her. He has his own gravitational center, his interests, his work, his routines, his quiet inner world. These are not negotiable. This creates a powerful asymmetry, because while she is trying to understand where she fits into your life, you are already fully rooted in your own. This asymmetry does not humiliate, it fascinates, and fascination is one of the purest forms of desire. Another key element is ambiguity. Ambiguity is the territory where desire grows, not revealing everything you feel too quickly, not defining the relationship too early, not labeling emotions before their time. Because speed is the enemy of desire. When you declare yourself too soon, when you reveal your intentions completely, you remove the possibility of imagination, and imagination is the womb of hidden desire. Machiavelli warned never to reveal plans prematurely, because power weakens when exposed too early. Desire follows the same logic. Then there is emotional control, and this is where most men fail. Because small emotional tests are always appearing, delays, colder replies, a softer tone, moments of distance. These things are not always conscious, but they work as emotional tests. And the silent question behind them is simple. Does this shake you? If you respond with anxiety, with pressure, with long explanations, then the answer is yes, and your magnetism collapses instantly. But when you respond with calmness, holding your ground, something shifts. Desire grows when the other person realizes they cannot control your inner world. Awakening desire without touching requires self-control, and self-control is a silent form of power. This is not about pretending you don't care, it is about not being ruled by every emotional impulse. Machiavelli admired leaders who knew how to wait, who didn't act out of desperation, who understood the right timing. And in the game of desire, timing is everything. Knowing when to appear, when to withdraw, when to speak, when to remain silent. One wrong move kills the tension. One precise move intensifies it. There is also a deeper element that few people ever discuss, the shadow. Everyone carries hidden desires that don't match the polished image they show the world. Women are no different. Much of their desire does not fit the public narrative, and that doesn't make it weaker, it makes it stronger. The man who awakens this hidden desire does not try to be morally perfect or excessively nice. He is not a savior, he is not a victim. He simply exists fully without apologizing for being who he is. And this touches something ancient, something deeper than social rules. When you are comfortable with your own ambiguity, without acting, you unconsciously give the other person permission to access theirs, not through words, but through energy. That is why desire can appear without touch, because the real touch happens first on a symbolic level. A gaze held 1 second longer than expected, a short but grounded reply, a quiet withdrawal at the exact moment interest begins to grow. These gestures speak louder than language. The common mistake is to confuse this with coldness. It is not coldness. Coldness is the absence of life. What we are describing is contained intensity, presence without invading, attention without submission. Machiavelli knew that the most powerful rulers were not the loudest or the cruelest, but the ones who were controlled yet unpredictable. And in desire, controlled unpredictability creates constant tension. She never fully knows what you think, but she can feel that something is there. And when this dynamic takes root, an internal shift happens inside her. She begins to invest emotionally without realizing it. She revisits conversations. She searches for meaning in small details. She starts interpreting every signal, not because you asked her to, but precisely because you didn't. Hidden desire grows when it is not demanded, when it is not rushed, when it is not named too soon. And here is the truth most people refuse to accept. Desire is not democratic. It does not arise because you were polite, kind, or persistent. Desire appears because you occupy a symbolic place of autonomy and mystery. And that requires emotional maturity. It requires the ability to tolerate uncertainty, to live without immediate control, to sit with silence without filling it with anxiety. Very few people can do this, which is why very few ever awaken desire without touching. There is an even more uncomfortable truth here, because it goes against the emotional survival instincts of most people. The less you try to guarantee the outcome, the more power you have over the process. The ordinary man acts from the fear of losing something even before he has it. He tries to secure, to confirm, to lock the connection in place. The man who awakens hidden desire accepts the possibility of loss as part of the game. This changes everything, not because he wants to lose, but because he does not behave like someone terrified of that possibility. And fear is always felt, even when it is never spoken. Female desire is incredibly sensitive to emotional fragility disguised as kindness. When there is a silent need for validation, it is sensed. No matter how polite, thoughtful, or intelligent you are, neediness infects every gesture. Machiavelli would say, "He who rules from fear of losing power has already lost it." In desire, the man who acts from fear of rejection has already placed himself beneath the other. Desire does not respect those who beg for it, even when the begging is silent. There is also a dangerous illusion that emotional intensity creates desire. In reality, intensity without structure creates exhaustion. Hidden desire grows where there is restraint, where you feel but do not spill everything, where you notice but do not accuse, where you want but do not rush. Restraint creates density. Density creates magnetism. The man who cannot contain himself becomes predictable. And predictability does not provoke desire. It only creates comfort. And at this stage, comfort is not seductive. Another crucial element is how you handle your attention. Attention is currency. If you give it away carelessly, you devalue yourself. When you choose carefully where your presence goes, you create scarcity. Not artificial scarcity, but natural scarcity. You are not always available because you have a life. You have silence, you have focus. This communicates something powerful. Your attention has a cost, and anything that has a cost awakens desire. What is free is consumed without thought. Many confuse this with childish games, but it's not about ignoring or punishing. It is about refusing to place yourself in the position of someone waiting to be chosen. You are not sitting there waiting for replies like a defendant waiting for a verdict. You respond when it makes sense. You appear when you choose, not when you are summoned. This changes how the other person sees you, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you are truly not easy to access emotionally without merit. And that is deeply attractive. There is also the question of emotional mirroring. When you respond with equal or slightly less intensity than the other person, You keep the center of the dynamic. But when you respond with more intensity, you hand over the emotional lead. Hidden desire strengthens when there is balance, or even a subtle advantage in your favor. Machiavelli knew that power concentrated too heavily on one side creates rebellion, but power completely surrendered creates contempt. So desire lives in this unstable equilibrium. A common mistake is trying to accelerate intimacy, believing it means deep connection. Most of the time, it is simply anxiety wearing the mask of honesty. Real intimacy takes time, and hidden desire grows in that gap. When you rush, you steal the relationship's most powerful phase, expectation. Expectation is often stronger than possession. Once something is possessed, desire inevitably changes shape, or fades, which is why those who understand the game never rush to touch. There is also a symbolic dimension in behavior that very few people recognize. Every action communicates your position. Every reaction reveals emotional hierarchy. When you justify yourself too much, you place yourself below. When you over-explain, you are asking permission to exist. When you accept any condition just to maintain closeness, you become too flexible. But desire needs resistance. It needs to feel that there are limits, that there are parts of you that cannot be reshaped at will. The man who awakens desire without touching does not insist on always being understood. He is willing to be misunderstood at times, not because he wants confusion, but because he understands that the obsession to explain yourself is a subtle form of emotional submission. Machiavelli taught that public perception matters more than private explanation. In desire, perception weighs more than intention. Trying to constantly correct perception is simply a sign of insecurity. Then there is the art of strategic withdrawal. Knowing how to step away at the right time is a refined skill, not leaving dramatically, not disappearing to punish. Just quietly stepping back when you sense that the dynamic is becoming too comfortable, because constant comfort creates stagnation. Withdrawal creates reflection. When you disappear without conflict, you leave space open, and whatever remains unresolved begins to occupy the mind. Hidden desire lives inside that unresolved space. This is where most people fail, because they trust logic too much and psychology too little. They believe that if they are clear, direct, and consistently available, they will be valued. But desire does not follow rational criteria. It follows subtle emotional stimuli. It grows in silence, in pauses, in gentle uncertainty. When everything is said, everything is defined, everything is guaranteed, desire loses oxygen. And perhaps the hardest truth to accept is this: you cannot control someone else's desire, but you can control the position you occupy inside their imagination. That position is not built by what you promise, but by how you carry yourself. It is built by what you tolerate and what you refuse, by what you accept and what you walk away from, by how you act when no one is watching. Hidden desire is born the moment the other person realizes you cannot be easily shaped. This truth is uncomfortable because it requires inner strength. It requires tolerating silence without panicking. It requires resisting the hunger for instant validation. It requires living with a certain degree of uncertainty. Most people prefer the illusion of control over the possibility of real desire. That is why many settle for empty attention. But very few ever awaken deep attraction. And when you finally understand this, something shifts inside you before it ever shifts in the other. You stop acting to obtain a reaction. You begin acting out of coherence with yourself. And this silent coherence does not need to be announced. It is felt. It appears in your posture, in your rhythm, in the way you enter and leave people's lives. And it is at this point that hidden desire begins to awaken, without touch, without request, without explanation. Eventually, this dynamic stops being an external strategy and becomes something internal. The man who awakens desire without touching is no longer playing to win someone. He is playing to remain aligned with his own center, and that is what creates the deepest effect. Because hidden desire is not awakened by the one who tries to control others, but by the one who demonstrates control over himself. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous ruler is not the one who threatens, but the one who cannot be pressured. In desire, the logic is the same. When you do not react predictably, When you do not rush to explain yourself, when you refuse to restore emotional balance at any cost, you create a field of gravity. Inside that field, the other person must move, must interpret, must think. And thinking repeatedly about someone is already a form of desire, because desire begins as involuntary attention, and involuntary attention is always born from what remains unresolved. Many people believe that awakening desire means creating constant excitement. That's a mistake. Continuous excitement exhausts. Deep desire lives in rhythm, between presence and absence, between stimulation and emptiness. It is in the empty space that the mind begins to work. It is in the silence that fantasy is built. The man who does not fear emptiness creates room for the other person to fill it mentally, and whatever is built in the mind gains emotional weight. There is also a dimension of controlled risk. You do not try to please at any cost, and that means accepting that not everyone will like you. This acceptance changes your posture. You say what you think without aggression, but without excessive polishing. You don't reshape your opinions to be accepted. This creates friction. And friction, when it doesn't destroy, creates heat. Desire needs this psychological heat. Where everything is too smooth, nothing stays. Another essential point is coherence between your words and your actions. There is nothing more dull than strong words supported by weak behavior. The man who awakens desire without touch does not promise intensity. He lives it. He doesn't talk about independence, he practices it. He doesn't announce mystery, he simply never gives himself away completely. This coherence creates emotional credibility, and credibility is rare, and what is rare is desired. Then there is the effect of contrast. If you are always available, your presence loses value. If you are always absent, connection fades. Contrast exists when you know when to be there and when not to be. When your presence changes the room and your absence leaves a strange silence behind, that contrast isn't created by games, but by sensitivity to rhythm. Machiavelli would say that the one who understands rhythm governs without effort. Hidden desire also feeds on depth, not theatrical mystery, but layers. Shallow people are quickly decoded, deep people are not. When you don't reveal everything, when you don't unload your entire emotional history at once, when you don't rush into confessions, you create the sense that there is still more to discover. And whatever can still be discovered attracts. What has already been fully exposed loses its magic. Many confuse vulnerability with uncontrolled exposure. True vulnerability is selective. It is choosing when and with whom you reveal the fragile parts. Revealing everything too soon is not courage. It is anxiety masquerading as honesty. Hidden desire respects those who preserve themselves, not out of fear, but out of discernment. Machiavelli would never advise revealing your weaknesses to someone who has not yet proven loyalty. In desire, the principle is the same. There is also the importance of not competing. Whoever competes for attention has already placed themselves below. The man who awakens desire does not enter emotional contests. He does not try to prove he is better than others. He simply refuses to play the validation game. And this refusal creates curiosity. Why doesn't he compete? Why doesn't he try to impress? The mind begins searching for answers, and in searching, it invests emotional energy. At some point, a woman realizes something unsettling. She cannot predict you. She cannot categorize you. You don't react as expected. You don't chase approval. You are not disturbed by silence. And that breaks her internal patterns. And when patterns break, the mind shifts into a state of alertness. This state is not fear, it is heightened attention. And heightened attention is the doorway to desire. Most people fail because they want guarantees, clear signals, fast confirmation, direct answers. But hidden desire does not exist in environments of total certainty. It needs just enough ambiguity to breathe. When everything is too safe, desire falls asleep. When everything is too unstable, desire runs away. The balance between firmness and mystery is the most difficult and the most powerful point. Then something subtle happens. You realize you are no longer trying to awaken anything, you are simply being. And it is in this state that desire appears as a consequence, not a goal, because true desire does not respond to requests, it responds to presence, solid presence, contained presence, presence that does not beg, presence that does not need to touch in order to be felt. This is the part very few are able to sustain, because it requires releasing the illusion of control and trusting your own posture. It requires accepting that not everything needs to be resolved now. It requires tolerating the discomfort of what remains unsaid. But it is exactly inside this discomfort that hidden desire grows, silent, persistent, almost inevitable. There is an even deeper layer to this entire dynamic, one that rarely becomes conscious, yet works with enormous silent power. Hidden desire arises when a woman feels that by coming closer to you, something inside her is being activated. It is not about you as an object, but about who she becomes in your presence. That is the most subtle and the most powerful truth. People do not only desire others, they desire the inner state that the other person awakens in them. And this state is not created by compliments, touch, or promises, but by psychological contrast. When you do not over-adapt, when you do not reshape your identity to fit someone else's expectations, you create a different kind of mirror. In this mirror, she is not fully in control, nor completely comfortable. There is a slight tension, a sense that something cannot be fully captured. This feeling activates inner layers that stay asleep in predictable interactions. Hidden desire is born when emotional routine breaks. Many men think they need to be interesting. That is the fundamental mistake. What truly works is being interested in your own life, not in trying to be interesting for someone else. When your focus is genuinely directed toward what you build, what you create, who you are becoming, a magnetic field forms. Not because you try, but because you do not depend. Emotional dependence is felt as weight. Autonomy is felt as freedom, and freedom is desirable. There is also a paradox here. The less you try to control the situation emotionally, the more you actually guide it. Because real influence does not happen through force, but through reference. You become a fixed point, an axis, and everything that is an axis naturally draws motion around it. Machiavelli spoke about the power that flows from stability. And in the realm of desire, emotional stability is profoundly provocative, because it contrasts sharply with the inner chaos so many people carry. Another common mistake is constantly seeking validation, asking too many questions, wanting reassurance, needing to know what the other person feels at every moment. This places you in the position of the one who needs. And desire rarely flows toward the person who needs. It flows toward the one who appears complete, not perfect, but not dependent. The man who awakens desire without touching does not demand immediate reciprocity. He allows it to appear, or not, without collapsing internally. There is also the importance of the symbolic gaze, not just how you look at her, but how you see her. When you don't place a woman on a pedestal, but also don't minimize her, you create a rare space, silent equality. Not ideological equality, but emotional equality. You don't feel smaller, and you don't need to feel bigger. This neutrality is disorienting because it breaks the old pattern of domination versus submission. And wherever the pattern breaks, desire appears. Hidden desire also grows when you stop trying to resolve everything, when you allow certain tensions to exist without immediate explanation. Most people rush to eliminate emotional discomfort because they don't know how to live with it. But the man who can hold discomfort without dramatizing it demonstrates psychological maturity. Maturity is desirable, not as moral perfection, but as a sign of inner security. There is also the matter of psychological time. You don't try to compress into days what naturally unfolds over weeks. You don't force curiosity into instant intimacy. You allow the process to develop in layers. Each layer creates anticipation. Each anticipation feeds desire. When everything happens too quickly, the brain labels it consumption, not emotional conquest. Hidden desire prefers slow construction. At some point, the woman begins to notice something unsettling. You are not there to be emotionally completed by her. And this changes everything, because many relationships are built on mutual dependency. When one side is not dependent, the entire game shifts. She begins to wonder, what is his center? What drives him? What sustains him? These questions are not neutral. They pull her inward. And the irony is this: the more you move away from the goal of creating desire, the more effective you become at it. Because desire does not respond to direct intention, it responds to posture. It responds to how you occupy your space in the world, to how you refuse to negotiate your essence in exchange for attention, to how you never sell yourself cheaply. This truth is uncomfortable because it destroys the fantasy that you can control another person emotionally. It requires accepting that you cannot force anything, but the moment you accept that, you paradoxically gain more influence. Because now you influence through example, not pressure, through presence, not insistence. And when all of this integrates, something almost inevitable happens. Desire begins to rise in silence, in the gaps, in the absences, not as an explosion, but as an underground current, quiet and unstoppable. She may not even know how to explain it. She may rationalize it. She may deny it, but she feels it. And that feeling begins long before any touch, before any explicit words, before any obvious gesture. This is the moment when the invisible game reveals itself, not as crude manipulation, but as an understanding of human nature. Hidden desire is not created, it is allowed. Allowed the moment you stop begging, stop chasing, stop trying to convince, and begin simply standing firm in who you are with silent authority. There is a quiet turning point where normal logic stops working, and it's exactly there that hidden desire locks in. It happens when a woman realizes that even without touching her, without promising anything, without pressure of any kind, you still remain in her mind. Not as an open obsession, but as a reference point. Something she compares others to. Something that does not fade with time. And that is deeply unsettling, because it reveals the control isn't where she thought it was. Hidden desire hates predictability. It intensifies the moment she realizes she cannot fit you neatly into any ready-made narrative. You're not the desperate man seeking approval, and you're not the obvious manipulator forcing reactions. You exist in the dangerous middle ground, ambiguous, hard to define, impossible to categorize. And the human mind hates what it cannot classify quickly. What it cannot classify, it watches. And whatever it watches long enough, it invests in emotionally. There is something essential here that few have the courage to admit. Deep feminine desire does not arise from male submission, nor from cartoonish aggression. It grows from inner authority. Authority, not as dominance over others, but as alignment within yourself. When your actions, your words, and your silences all come from the same place, you radiate consistency. And consistency is rare in a world addicted to impulsive reactions. The rare attracts. The ordinary is ignored. Many men think they need to add more to keep a woman's interest. That belief is a trap. The more you try to add, the more insecurity you reveal. The man who awakens hidden desire does not add noise. He removes excess. He does not compete for attention. He does not emotionally perform. He does not justify his existence. And because of that, his presence gains weight. There is also the effect of being centered in yourself. Do not confuse this with selfishness. Self-centering is simply knowing where you begin and where you end. It is refusing to lose yourself just to please someone else. It is not absorbing another person's mood as if it were your own. When you keep your center steady, you create a healthy emotional asymmetry. The other person senses that you cannot easily be dragged into drama, instability, or power games. This creates respect, and respect is one of the silent fuels of desire. Another critical factor is your relationship with validation. The ordinary man is constantly searching for signs, messages, quick replies, compliments, constant reassurance. The man who awakens hidden desire does not rely on any of these signs to feel complete. He receives them without attachment. He doesn't react with excitement or with frustration. This emotional neutrality toward validation is deeply unsettling because it removes the other person's sense of control. And when control fades, interest grows. There is also the role of inner time, not clock time, but emotional time. You don't force synchronization. If she comes closer, you don't rush. If she pulls away, you don't chase. You keep the same internal rhythm. This stability creates a feeling of depth, as if you exist independently of the interaction itself, and then she begins to wonder, has he always been like this? That question echoes. Hidden desire also strengthens when you stop turning every interaction into a test or an expectation. You talk without trying to extract anything. You meet without projecting outcomes. This absence of pressure changes the entire emotional field. She feels free to move without being pulled, and paradoxically, that draws her closer. Because desire hates coercion, but loves a silent invitation. There is also a subtler layer, how you relate to your own sexuality, not in an explicit way, but in how naturally you carry it. The man who awakens desire without touching does not deny his sexuality, but he doesn't use it as currency either. He doesn't chase sexual validation, he doesn't turn desire into need. This creates an aura of containment. And containment is one of the most powerful forms of psychological eroticism. Many men believe they must show interest constantly. In truth, excessive interest kills mystery. Real interest is calm, not anxious, not loud. It shows up as full presence when you are there, and quiet silence when you are not. This rhythm sustains desire. At some point, the woman realizes she cannot trigger extreme reactions in you, neither high nor low. You don't ignite easily, you don't collapse either. This creates a strange sensation. She feels she must go deeper to reach you emotionally, and going deeper requires investment. Emotional investment creates attachment. Attachment creates desire. All of this happens without you asking for anything. And the most surprising part is that the longer you remain in this state, the less dependent you feel on any outcome at all. You are no longer trying to get someone. You are simply living your life with coherence, and coherence can be felt. People sense when someone refuses to trade their essence for attention. This is the truly Machiavellian element. The most powerful form of power does not need to announce itself, and the deepest form of desire does not need to be requested. Once you understand this, you stop acting like someone who begs, and you begin acting like someone who allows. You allow the other person to approach, you allow them to feel, you allow them to project onto you what already lives within them. And desire grows in that silent space. And it is inside this space of permission, silence, and restraint that hidden desire finally solidifies. Not as an instant explosion, but as a steady current, something that grows with time, something that doesn't need physical touch to exist. It feeds on your posture, your presence, and what most of all, your strategic absence. When touch finally happens, it is no longer the beginning. It is simply the late confirmation of something that started long before, in the invisible. But there is one final internal shift that must happen for all of this to last, because without it, a man eventually collapses back into old patterns. That shift is letting go of the identity of someone trying to awaken desire and becoming someone who does not need desire to feel real. As long as there is a secret need to trigger a reaction in someone else, there will always be inner tension, and that tension always leaks out. Hidden desire senses incoherence even before the mind can explain it. It knows when your posture is an act, and nothing kills magnetism faster than the feeling you are performing. When you truly understand that another person's desire does not define your worth, your energy changes, quietly but completely. You stop watching every gesture waiting for a response. You stop treating silence like a threat. You stop obsessively trying to read signals. You act, you speak, you withdraw, naturally. And that naturalness is what separates those who look confident from those who are. Machiavelli knew that appearances can sustain power, but only when there is substance behind them. Without substance, the mask falls. Hidden desire remains only when you stop making the relationship the center of your identity. The fatal mistake many men make is turning a woman into the emotional axis of their life before anything real even exists. This creates instant imbalance. The man who awakens desire without touching keeps multiple centers in his life: work, purpose, silence, inner construction. The woman is not the center, she is a possible satellite, and satellites orbit centers, not the other way around. There is also the danger of becoming addicted to her reactions. When your emotional state starts depending on how she responds, you've already lost your center. Hidden desire dissolves the moment you become reactive. Reactivity is emotional submission. Machiavelli warned that living only in reaction means surrendering initiative. And in the realm of desire, the one who always reacts loses the aura of autonomy. Another truth very few discuss is acceptance of the end. Paradoxically, desire grows when you are not terrified of losing something that doesn't even exist yet. Not because you want the end, but because you don't treat it like catastrophe. This calm acceptance creates inner freedom, and inner freedom is deeply felt. Emotionally free people are rare, and the rare is always desired. There is also the matter of respecting your own limits. The man who awakens desire without touching does not tolerate hidden disrespect disguised as jokes, nor emotional crumbs disguised as attention. He doesn't create drama, but he also doesn't normalize it. He simply withdraws. And when withdrawal comes from someone solid, it communicates far more than any speech ever could. It says, "There is a standard here, and I will not betray it." Over time, this posture creates an accumulating effect. Even if nothing progresses, even if there is never physical contact, something remains. You become a silent reference, an unresolved what if, and hidden desire lives precisely inside those what ifs. Not in what happened, but in what could have happened. The human mind always returns to what was left unresolved, and it's important to understand something. Not every woman will react the same way, and that is healthy. The man who needs to be desired by everyone is simply revealing insecurity. The man who accepts that not every woman will want him keeps his integrity. And integrity is always felt by those who are sensitive enough to notice. Deep desire is never universal, it is selective. And when you finally abandon the need to please everyone, something strange happens. Your presence becomes calmer. Your words become sharper. Your silences become more comfortable. You stop trying to fill empty spaces, and instead you learn to live inside them. And the person who becomes comfortable with emptiness no longer fears absence. That absence then becomes powerful. It doesn't scream, it echoes. In the end, everything reduces to one truth Machiavelli would understand without effort. Real power is not about controlling others. It is about not being controlled by them. And real desire is not about forcing reactions. It is about maintaining your center. When you hold your inner position, the world reacts not out of obligation, but because of gravity. Hidden desire is not a trick, it is a consequence. A consequence of a man who does not sell himself cheaply, who does not over-explain, who does not offer himself before the right time. A man who knows how to enter and leave quietly, who doesn't fall apart in silence, who doesn't turn another person into a savior or a judge. And when this posture finally solidifies, something irreversible happens. Even if you touch, even if the relationship deepens, the desire does not disappear, because it was not built on emotional hunger, but on respect and symbolic tension. Touch stops being the goal. It becomes simply one chapter, not the foundation. This is the truth most people try to hide because it demands inner responsibility. There are no magic phrases, no shortcuts. There is posture. There is silence, there is restraint, there is the courage to stop asking for what, paradoxically, only arrives when you no longer ask. Hidden desire awakens when you stop trying to awaken it, when you occupy your place in the world with quiet firmness, when you understand that you do not need to touch in order to be felt. Because when the foundation is solid, presence always comes before contact. And in this game, the invisible always comes before the visible.